Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining. Again, my name is Awod Ngwenya. I'm from Zimbabwe, Harare, and I'll be the moderator for today's meeting. And lined up on today's meeting, we're going to have a guest speaker who is going to speak on weaponization and Africa. And also we're going to have a youth lecture from Nana Akua, and lastly, our Pan-African Organizing History class with Dr. Tyrone Wright. We welcome all of you. Thank you. You can write in the comment section your name, where you are from, and also when you join the ILoveBlackPeople, and whether you're a member or an ambassador. Thank you all. We appreciate all of you. To start off the meeting, I'm going to lead everyone. I'm going to lead you in a prayer. I'm going to use my indigenous language, which is Shona. I'm from Zimbabwe, and right now I'm in Harare. So let us all bow our heads and let us pray. At number 10. Change maribaba tokutenda ini chipoto upenyu chamutwazvaniswa. Tauya pamberi pekutaura chenyu chikumbiro mutsa nemweya mutsveni yamungatungamira Mwari nezviso zvatinoita kukwaniswa kufamba zvinenge zvakanaka. Tanamata tenzi chikumbira rudo rwenyu dai rungavape tiri mativi mane enyika akasiyana siyana. Chitungamirirai tenzi zvise zvatinoronga tisingakanganwi vamwe vedu vari kunyika inonzi Ukraine. Tenzi wangu dai manga vatungamirira tenzi wangu, mavapa simba, mavapa courage, mavawandisa nezvakaipa vakukwanisa kukunda nenjodzi yavasangana nayo. Tinamata mumwe nemumwe ese avari panguva ino mativi mane enyika akasiyana siyana. Dai mungatitungamirira tenzi wangu uye mupe simba sevanhu vatema, tigokwanisa tive vanhu vanokunda zvose tenzi kuzosiyana neiyo mbiri yenyu inogara isingaperi. Amen. Yeah, that was a prayer, and also I did mention in my prayer about our Black folks and brothers and sisters who are residing in Ukraine, where there is war tensions between Ukraine and Russia. We are with them. As I love Black people, we help Black people and we protect them globally. So wherever they are, we give them assistance, and we do have our emergency button on our website, which is ILoveBlackPeople.com. That's where they can reach out to us, and we can as well reach out maybe to embassies in Ukraine so that they can get assistance to leave that countries. Hopefully everyone will be safe from this crisis. Again, thank you all. We can invite more people. I can see we only have 27 participants on this meeting, whilst we are more than 70K members on our nation. We kindly ask everyone to invite at least a friend or a family to come and interact with us like people. To start off the meeting, we're going to have country spokesperson from different countries. We're going to start with Elijah Nyabuti to speak on behalf of our sister Karina from Mozambique. Yes, Elijah Nyabuti, you can go ahead.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Sorry, Elijah, we can't hear you clearly. Can you increase your volume? Yes, can you hear me, Elijah?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, now you are okay. We could hardly hear you. You can go ahead.
Okay, this is the Mozambique report. Reporting on behalf of Karina. The report is dated 20th February 2022 to 26th February 2022. The country weekly activities to protect Black people from racism and xenophobia. So in the group, the weekly newsletter was shared, which highlights on our 8 essential categories. Announcements were made to call members to volunteer as ambassadors of ILoveBlackPeople. All social media accounts of ILoveBlackPeople were shared to the group, and members were encouraged to follow, like, comment. The community members from different countries were asked to prepare, write, and submit their weekly report. Our co-founder, Mr. Sinclair Skinner, hosted a Pan-African Twitter Space meeting, and the Mozambican communities celebrated the legends Du Bois and Wilson, two of the Pan-African heroes. The COVID-19 abate in Mozambique. The report is dated 25th February 2022. The track trace test was 7,236,405. Performed test was 1,266,050. Tested positive were 225,018 people. Tested negative were, the cumulative fatalities were 2,192. Recoveries were 219,320. On behalf of Anna Karina from Mozambique, I am Elijah Nyabuti from Kenya. I am because we are.
I am because we are. Thank you so much, Elijah Nyabuti, for presenting a report compiled by our sister Anna Karina from Mozambique. On next, we're going to have a friend Emmanuel from Tanzania. Yes, a friend Emmanuel from Tanzania. You can mute. Can you unmute yourself, friend Emmanuel? I think friend Emmanuel is having challenges. Whilst we can figure it out, let's have Joe K. Kendichi to present on behalf of Haiti, on our brother EIG Jr. Yes, Joe Kendichi.
Yes, I'm hearing you clearly.
Yes, you can go ahead and present on behalf of our brother EIG Jr. from Haiti.
Yes, it's my honor and pleasure to be solidarity with my brother in Haiti, which is due, it may come later. Let me read for presentation for him. I Love Black People Haiti Weekly Report, date 25 February 2022. Weekly review, 20 February 2022 to 2026, 26 February 2022. Summary of activity. We start our Saturday conference meeting by enjoying our usual spokesperson reports on weekly activity in our respective country, region, and ambassadors group. Our most Pan-African class session delivered by Professor Dr. Dyron Wright, Outer book, Bokoti, Washington book. Pan-Africanist and Queen Mother Nana Agua Sensele, traditional healer and founder of Natural Path Holistic Wellness Center, LLC, respectively. We glad to continue with the marathon of season health lesson and Pan-African education. Our regular newsletter on Tuesday was shared on highlight on education, health, legal, transportation, beauty, and accommodation. Another Black on Black friendly content was enjoyed. Members were encouraged to submit their contribution on Thursday for review and publishing in newsletter. I Love Black People members were encouraged to follow, like, retweet, and comment on various social media platform and of other group. Our co-founder Singler Skinner has live Twitter on Space and also on Facebook and also on Twitter, Telegram, week with interesting Black motivated contents. Our honorable ambassadors and members were encouraged to embark on group activities to help effect the mission and vision of I Love Black People. Activities in protection against racism and xenophobia. We join hands with our brothers and sisters all over the world, where in Africa, homeland, and Africa diaspora, facing any form of disgrace, xenophobic attacks on racism with encouragement. Relief on how love messages I Love Black People members and family or friends to use emergency pattern, which is shown on located on bottom of the ILoveBlackPeople.com website, in fight or protect against racism and xenophobic attack wherever may find yourself. We join family and friends in our country groups to celebrate and wish each other happy season and the month of wish of our loved ones, families, friends, true love we shield with visiting Cooper and many others shown off from the wall. As we celebrate their month, beloved, let us love, for love is good. We pray for peace in Ukraine, Russia, US, NATO, and size war in Kiev. Members who want against the group mission objective and call were banalized and inform them to stick to the group mission objective and goals only if they want to enjoy their membership. Ambassadors, members in our country group made time to help all new members with their challenges, with their weekly tasks, and we encourage everyone to seek for clarification and assistance when they needful. I Love Black People members, old or new, were once again encouraged to stick to the I Love Black People mission and contribution only to the fight against racism and xenophobic attack. In our country, members who were not able to attend this session. Yes, this is the teaching in this Thursday, in this Saturday, where encouraged to do so this time and further recommend other by sharing the link to the friends and family in meeting. COVID-19 update in Haiti, accumulative confirmed cases 322,867, new cases is 47, death is 47, vaccinated is 20,345,098, submitted by IEG Junior Ambassador Haiti African Diaspora. One love. I love Black people. I am because we are. Over to you, moderator. Sorry.
Yes, I am because we are. Thank you so much, our brother Joe Kekedici, for presenting on behalf of our brother EIG Junior from Haiti. On next, we are going to try again to have Frank Emmanuel to unmute. Frank Emmanuel, can you unmute yourself? I think Frank Emmanuel is facing challenges. Maybe brother Elijah Nyabuti can go ahead and present on behalf of our brother Frank Emmanuel from Tanzania his report.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Okay. On behalf of Tanzania, on behalf of Frank Emmanuel from Tanzania, this is Tanzania Weekly Report, which is dated 20th February 2022 to 25th February 2022. The weekly activities in Tanzania on February 20th, 2022, a new network of the movement was created in Tanzania with Frank Emmanuel volunteering as ambassador. In the last Zoom conference call, we had interactive class session with the special guest, Dr. Tyreen Wright, and a professor of the City University of New York and the author of Booker T. Washington and Africa. The Making of Pan-Africanist and the Healer, the Queen Mother Nana Akua Sensele. Members were asked to enroll for Pan-African class on Zoom. Social media accounts were shared into the group and members were encouraged to follow, like, comment in all platforms. On February 25th, 2022, a new WhatsApp group involved Tanzania members were created with the aim of expanding a network in the region, protecting Black people from racism and xenophobia. Members and ambassadors were encouraged to always attend the online Zoom event, which aims to build a global network to help and protect Black people from racism and xenophobia. The Tanzania COVID-19 update, the report is that As from 25th February 2022, the total confirmed cases were 33,620. The cumulative fatalities were 798. Report was submitted by Frank Emmanuel from Tanzania, and I am Elijah Nyabuti from Kenya, because we are.
I am because we are. I thank you, Elijah. Before you go, I would like you to report the last report from Aminga Robson Mogaka. Unfortunately, today he couldn't join us due to network issues. And also, so you're going to present on behalf of Robson Mogaka from Kenya.
Yes, on behalf of Robinson Mogaka from Kenya, this is the Kenya report, which is dated from 20th to 26th February 2022. Activities were on Saturday, 20th February 2022. We had a Pan-African class session with Nana Akwa-Sensela and Dr. Tyreen Wright. The country spokesperson presented their weekly reports. Regular weekly newsletter was shared, which highlights on our 8 essential categories. On 21st February 2022, we had Twitter Space meeting hosted by our co-founder, Mr. Sinclair Skinner. And yesterday, members and ambassadors was asked to prepare and submit their weekly reports. The COVID-19 update in Kenya, as from 25th February 2022, the cumulative confirmed cases were 322,869. The total recoveries were 303,198. Total fatalities were 5,638. Cumulative tests were 3,357,710. Vaccinated was 16,456,660. Report was prepared by Minga Robson Mugaka from Kenya, and I am Elijah Nyabuti from Kenya. I am because we are.
I am because we are. Thank you so much, Brother Elijah Nyabuti, for presenting on behalf of Kenya. At the moment, we are paid to on our conference meeting. We kindly ask all of you to invite our friends and family so that by the time our speaker starts speaking, our family members and friends will be on during the call to learn more about Black people and to hear more about what's going on around Africa and the world in large, focusing on Black people. I'm going to read the report, which was written, compiled by Derek Mfonda from Zambia, dated 21st February 2022 to 25th February 2022. Activities. Last Twitter meeting, we had interactive class session with Sinclair Skinner, the co-founder and members. We asked to enroll for Pan-African class on Zoom. All the members were encouraged to stand by their origin and know where they are coming from. Members were told that we are not yet to fight, but to correct the situation that put Black people in an awkward lives. Members were encouraged to unite, preach and peace in continent Africa. Regular newsletter was shared, which highlights on our 8 essential categories, whereby members were told to submit their articles for publication if they to be included in the weekly newsletter. Social media accounts was shared to group members who were encouraged to follow, like, comment on all platforms. Members and ambassadors are encouraged to always attend our online Zoom, which aims to build a global network to help and protect Black people from racism and xenophobia. On 25th February 2022, members were asked to prepare and submit weekly reports, Zambia COVID-19 updates. Reports of today, 25th February 2022, total confirmed cases were 312,374. Total tests are 3,263,154. Recoveries are 306,247. Vaccinated dose are 1,938,939. Full vaccinated are 1,884,511. Booster vaccinated are 31,110. And COVID deaths are 3,947. Are reported by Derek Mfonda from Zambia, and because we are. And moving on next, we're going to have our speaker for today. His name is Zo Owusu and is from Ghana. Zo, you can go ahead and present yourself introduce yourself, before will go ahead and give us the speech for today. Yes, so you can unmute yourself.
Hello, good day. I hope I'm loud and clear.
Yes, a good day. We can hear you.
All right, then I just move on with the speech for today. A speech delivered by Ambassador Zoe Usuagbe on 26 February 2022, titled The Weaponization of Democracy, written by Ogini Odimola. All they care about is whether or not they will continue to have easy access to Africa's resources. Terrorism, communism, autarky, left-wing radicalism. These are the ambiguous words we see and hear from the neoliberal media outlets whenever there is a complete overturn of reactionary governments impoverishing the people of Africa. The truth is that the Western liberal world, which considers itself the international community, doesn't care about Africa's political orientation or ideology. It cares even less whether Africans have left-wing or right-wing leanings. All they care about is whether or not they will continue to have easy access to Africa's resources. The case of Libya is illustrative of this point. Colonial Muammar Gaddafi was murdered by the international community, ostensibly to save the people of Libya from state terrorism and left-wing radicalism. This happened at a time when the per capita income of an average Libyan was one of the highest in the world, and when the people of Libya had reasonable and sustainable material conditions. Today, Libya has turned into a war zone where foreign powers wrestle for mineral wealth and where the people do not have the right to determine their future. Do we call this democracy or Western terrorism? Consider this. Any political and economic system ought to be anchored on the cultural and historic context of a people because it should be born out of the need to solve problems confronting their society. It follows that the resulting political and economic organization in Africa and elsewhere would be as diverse as the unique conditions that led to their creation. Therefore, the power of transformation, reformation, and maintenance of a political economic system must depend on the creative power and the cultural ability and necessity of a people to do so. Clearly, it is not incumbent on foreigners to determine what political economic system will suit other people. Invading nations, killing innocent people, and destroying civilization in a bid to spread democracy is terrorism and a betrayal of the basic tenets and principles of democracy. In other words, those who spread democracy are the most anti-democratic people the world has ever known. The above outline ambiguous terms used by neoliberal media outlets and diversionary, they are meant to divert our attention away from the main issue, Western powers, predatory practice. In the same vein, ECOWAS and the African Union are applying cynical and anti-people stringent sanctions, supposedly for the restoration of democracy. Yet, the issue in Africa is not backsliding of democracy. Instead, Africa is facing the weaponization of democracy by liberal world, which never loses sight of the prize, Africa's vast resources. By refusing to stand with the people, ECOWAS and the African Union are proving to be nothing but an extension of Western powers, whose main preoccupation is to preserve the neo-colonial structures and ultimately deplete the material conditions of Africans. In the main, this explains why Africa houses the poorest people in the world despite being the richest continent in the world in terms of mineral and human resources, a devastating paradox. Moreover, if democracy means liberty and freedom, why are African people denied the liberty to create the society that suits them? The ability to be in the world, understand the world, and project the understanding of the world is not the right of a few, but the right of every human being on the surface of this planet Earth. Therefore, the denial of a people to be in the world, understand it, and project their understanding of the world is fatal dehumanization. The sad reality is that Africans are the only people on this earth whose ability to think and create a society emanating from their consciousness and realities has been taken away from. Tragically, this atrocity is pretended by those who want to keep them powerless, exploited, and relevant. To a very large extent, the creative power of African people is gradually being erased, if not completely obliterated. We are the only ones who must follow while others lead. We must be treated as objects who must think what others want us to think, who must be possessors of consciousness but not conscious people. This therefore means that we are borrowed from creating our own political and economic system because our consciousness has been buried and our political, economic, and social realities have been and continue to be shaped by people who have kept us in bondage for centuries and are unwilling to allow us the slimmest chance to enjoy our humanity. Sadly, Africa has become a war field where Western powers wrestle for mineral resources and Africans are the ones losing their lives for it. This is the constant truth Africa have to contend with, even as they read the distortion of their realities in the neoliberal media outlets. I love Black people. I am because we are. Thank you.
I am because we are. Thank you so much, Brother Zo Owusu Akpe, for presenting Weaponization of Africa. We appreciate all of you. Our numbers are very low. We only have 29 participants on this meeting. We kindly ask you to share the link which was shared in the chat section to our friends and family to join. Lined up today, we are going to start with the healthcare lecture with Nana Akua. So whilst we're waiting for Nana Akua to start off the meeting, we kindly ask all of you to invite friends and family. And also those who are on Facebook, you can write your name, where you are joining us from, and also whether a member and ambassador of ILoveBlackPeople. And also if it's your first time to be with us on Facebook, you can just let us know. Write it in the comment section. And same applies on the chat section. If you haven't done so, please can you write in the chat section where you are joining us from, your name, and also whether a member or an ambassador of ILoveBlackPeople. Hopefully, all of you had access to Amazon and grabbed your copies for the Global Green Book 2021 Healthcare Edition. We encourage all of our members to have a copy, and some programs which are due soon. We're going to have we're also going to have our application which is going to be issued out. So make sure that you signed up to be on the waiting list for those who are going to use the application of ILoveBlackPeople. You should be one of the people for the first people to use the application. So I would encourage all of you to sign up on the wait list so that you can then also receive the notification when we launch the application. The good news is it's going to be available on both iOS and also Android devices. So for iPhone users, you're also eligible to the application. And this application can be used by anyone who is our member, and you can share with anyone. And also it's going to be downloadable through store for free, Apple Store and Google Store. Both of them, it's going to be accessible. So with the current situation which is happening in Ukraine, we posted a post last week ensuring that everyone who is on that side, they are safe. We protect Black people globally, so we ensure that Black people who are staying in Ukraine were safe. And also we did get in touch with the embassy so that they can assist the best they can for their fellow Black brothers who are there. We had 10 countries who have their embassies in the Ukraine. So hopefully they did help their citizens so that they can come back to Africa or fly in the nearby states. For example, most of the Zimbabwe students who were there, around 37 of them were rescued and now they're safe in Poland. So we really appreciate the work everyone is doing, and we do have Ukraine in our prayers, and we are praying for peace. We do have crises which we are fighting at the end. We do have the COVID-19, which we are trying to contain, and now we're starting to fight against each other. So we do pray for peace, and also would like everyone of you to spread love as we are one of our members and ambassadors. So on today's meeting, the Pan-African History class, this is I think this is the last set for the first for the current class which we're having at the classes on Zoom, and also the certificates. We shared the message. Kindly follow that message and write to that number which shared the message for you to receive the certificate at the end of the lectures. The certificates are going to be issued at the first week of March. So make sure that you submit your name to be written on the certificate. If you don't do so, you know there is no certificate which is going to be awarded to you. These are the certificate of participation, which shows that you have participated in the online Pan-African classes. So we can ask every one of you to kindly submit your certificate to be written, your name to be written for the certificate. And also we do have our waiting list. So far we have around 4 groups which are already full on WhatsApp for those people who are going to start the Pan-African History class for March. So we kindly encourage you to invite your friends and family to join us and learn more about the Pan-African history. So we appreciate all the effort which you are doing in order to protect Black people from racism and xenophobia. So to start off with the healthcare lecture, we are going to have Nana Akua Nzenzele to give us a lecture. It's Nana Akua, you can invite. I can see Alima Baka has raised his hand. You can kindly write in the comment section whether you want to give your opinion or you want to comment about what I've just said. Yes, Nana Akua, welcome to our Saturday Pan-African Healthcare class.
Yes, good day, greetings everyone. Thank you for joining us again today. I would like to share, I tried to pull up and be prepared for our greetings. I appreciate seeing the faces. Thank you. Who's hosting? Is it you, Award, or is it Yvonne? If you'll enable me.
Yes, you are able to.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are on week 4 today. Oh, if I can share. I hope that you are seeing the cleansing and detox handout.
No.
Of course not. That'd be too much like, right? You can only see what I am trying to pull up, right? So today we're talking about, while I try to maneuver this, today we're going to talk about the differences between cleansing and detoxification and how to cleanse the body. I think you can see it now, right?
Yes.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, thank you. So we'll discuss different ways to cleanse the body, both internally and externally. And I've added some new handouts to this slide presentation. So we'll have a little bit more illustration about different ways to cleanse or detox the body. But what I always like to start with is a basic working definition of both words. And while I tend to use them interchangeably, I wanted to provide definitions of each. So detoxification generally refers to the process of removing a poisonous or harmful substance from the body, or at least neutralizing or mitigating the effects of that poison or toxin, right? And then cleansing usually refers to the process of making something thoroughly clean, ridding the body of unhealthy, unnecessary substances, cleansing by washing. So cleansing any toxins, any impurities, any disease-causing pathogens, such as viruses, bacteria, fungus, parasites, things of this nature. And so these have slightly different definitions, and I usually will use both or either. And so in regards to cleansing, we know that there's a need to cleanse the body because we often come into contact with substances that are not in our best benefit. Whether it's something that we've eaten and taken in the bodies internally, we have to go through and cleanse because not every substance that we consume really has nutritional value. So all of the impurities, all of the food matter that is not nutrient dense, does not contain any of the micro or macronutrients that we've discussed in prior weeks, we need to go through a process of cleansing or detoxifying that from our systems. Also, we know that we come in contact with environmental toxins, things that are just in the air, they're in the environment. They may be in our school, our work, the overall environment that we have to move and walk through and travel through on a day-to-day basis. And so there's a need to cleanse or flush out those impurities as well. It also may be from medications that we have to take. Those can sometimes have harmful effects, whereas it may overall have a benefit health-wise for whatever disease or condition you may have, but we know that there will be side effects and other remnants of that drug that may not be beneficial to the body, especially the liver, right? So we know that in those cases, we may need to do a detox. So we'll talk about the different ways in which to detox, but these are some of the reasons why we may need to cleanse or detox our bodies. And what I don't often talk about in this regard is also the need to detox the mind and the spirit. And I won't include a lot of that today, but I think that's also important to take note. We often will talk about or refer to detoxing and cleansing just as it deals with our physical bodies, but know that it is all related. Mind, body, and spirit is the concept of the holistic approach. So we also have to be mindful of what is impacting our spirit, our emotions, our psychological well-being. And we talked a lot about that last week when we talked about stress release and how we have to balance in ways in which to balance the emotions and to address mental, psychological, spiritual stressors, right? So know that cleansing and detoxification can include and should include those types of cleansing as well. So this, section primarily deals with the physical paths of elimination, but know that we also have to take good care of our spiritual being. And this may be from praying, meditating, fasting, other spiritual rituals, spiritual cleansing baths that will physically go on the body, but is combined with prayer and meditation or chanting or, incantations and whatever that will align you with spirit and allow you to flush and cleanse out any spiritual or mental or psychological thoughts or feelings or energy. So I wanted to put that note in there because most of these handouts will deal just with physical cleansing, but know that there's a need to address that as well. So in regards to doing a detoxification or a physical cleanse, know that there are certain symptoms or side effects of detoxifying. Common symptoms include body aches, headaches, body odor, bad breath, weakness, purging, skin rashes, fatigue, soreness, inflammation. All of these things can happen while doing a cleanse. So you can take note and, monitor how severe these things are, but these are common side effects. And we know that different ways in which to cleanse may include the use of herbs or homeopathic remedies. You may implement a detox diet. You may do fasting or juicing or juice fasting. You may include detox body or detox foot baths. Different types of massage are often used to detox or cleanse the body. This may be deep tissue massage. This may be shiatsu massage, or any other number of body work techniques that move energy and break up muscle tension and pain and such in different parts of the body, the muscles, the joints, things of that nature. And then we also know skin brushing is another method of cleansing. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we talk about the path of elimination of the skin. And moving into that, we know that the body releases toxins through 5 primary paths. And these are all filtering organs, if you will. They are partly responsible for eliminating some type of fluid or gas or solid waste or different types of toxins through its vessel, through its organ. And so these paths are kidneys, liver, colon, skin, and the lungs. And we know that if one is overworked or compromised in any way, it will indeed impact the others. So you may be having regular bowel movements, for example, and the colon seems to be functioning fine, but you may not be having really good full urination or releases or flushing from the kidneys. Or you may not have proper functioning of the liver. And you may know that because your skin is breaking out, or you're not able to kind of digest certain fats and oils and things of that nature. Or more severe symptoms like your skin turning, yellowish or orange or what have you. You may be feeling sluggish. There are many, reasons why you may know or how you may know that certain parts or certain organs are overworked or compromised. And obvious with skin, you may have really severe dry skin, itchy skin, flaky skin. It may be even in the skin on your head, the scalp, where you're having really, really bad dandruff or other hair or scalp issues. You may be having breakouts on your skin where it looks like adult acne or other types of rashes. You may develop boils or cysts or abscesses. These are indications that maybe the skin is compromised. In terms of the lungs, you may have difficulty, the difficulty breathing, but then you also may have a lot of mucus. You may have to expel a lot of phlegm, and you know, you're not really getting good quality breaths. If you're doing conscious breathing exercises like we talked about last week, you may not really be able to inhale really deeply and feel as if you can really then exhale as deeply as you can inhale. Or you may get chronic sinus infections or bronchial infections. If you have asthma, it may flare up, or you have more attacks, or you may develop asthma even in your later years. So there are many indications for when we have overworked our passive elimination, or when there is a need to detox or cleanse them. And we know that we may do these by using herbs for each of these paths of elimination, for each of these organs. We may eat certain foods that heal these organs and cleanse and detox these organs. We may eat them in whole form, or we may juice them. We know that there are essential oils in which we may consume or use topically that will assist in this cleansing. So there are different ways, and we're going to discuss a few of those here today, okay? And in terms of what I just mentioned, let's discuss some of the recipes, some of the remedies, some of the things that we may use to cleanse these organs. This handout here, which is not that clear, and I've added some that I think will give a little more information, and this will be more so for your reference. One may choose to do a liver cleanse, a 3-day liver cleanse, where you're restricted to what you consume upon rising, what you eat for breakfast, what you take in for lunch and dinner. And these, of course, are going to be juices, teas, whole grains, vegetables, you know, no meat, you know, certain foods that we know are friendly to the liver, such as beets and avocados and walnuts and lime and liver. I did not mean to say liver, lime and lemons. You know, drinking plenty of water and things of that nature. We know that other foods like garlic or spices or herbs like cilantro and garlic, turmeric, these are all excellent for the liver as well. You may choose to do beet juice, or you may do beets in your salad, or you may, I guess some people cook and eat beets, but I'm not a big fan of beets, but you may cook them and just eat them, you know, along with your meal. Generally, I throw them in a juicer along with some other foods. It's not my favorite, but some people love beets. And if you do, that'll be a bonus or a plus for you, because it's really good for your liver and for your blood. And then off to the left here, there are just a couple of other foods. Now, some of the cruciferous types of foods, like the broccoli and cauliflower, some people are opposed to these foods. And I think one of the questions that occurred in the group, and I think cabbage is one of those. There are definitely holistic practitioners, and Dr. Sabi, who I definitely respected, who's an ancestor now, would often talk about some of the fruits and vegetables that he didn't recommend using. And I won't so much get into whether you should consume cabbage, which was the question specifically, but people also feel the same way about broccoli and cauliflower. I think Dr. Sabi also didn't support the eating of spinach, and probably some other things. I know some practitioners won't include bananas in the diet. I do know of some health benefits for some of these fruits and vegetables. I simply pass the information along. I do think that it can be beneficial. If we're talking about cabbage, for example, we know that it's good for the liver, but we also know it's been used traditionally to heal stomach and digestive issues as well. Definitely as a breastfeeding mom, early on when, the breasts were engorged and were fighting off possible infection due to, just the engorgement from all of the milk production. Cabbage leaves laid on the breast really help draw out infection. So me personally, just knowing health benefits to it, it is something that's in my diet. However, if you're not if you're not comfortable with consuming any of these foods, that definitely is your choice. And I do understand there have been questions about how these foods came about and whether they are natural foods. So that's definitely your choice. I don't have a whole lot to say about that. Some of these foods specifically are also known to cause excess gas in the system. So if broccoli and cauliflower and these types of foods don't suit you, then simply, eliminate those, focus on the other handouts and the other foods listed here and on the previous handout that I think was referenced in the juicing handouts that I listed in the group. But the other part is that some of these handouts, I usually will point out the ones I just definitely don't agree with. But again, this is for your information. And you take what you can use and what you're comfortable with, and then you leave the rest. So I don't care to, and this is one of those handouts, right? So everything in this handout, I certainly wouldn't list if we're talking about foods for a healthy detox. I would definitely leave out altogether. I think they list some of the meats here, buffalo, lamb, venison, and even the turkey, the chicken, the hens, and things of that nature. Generally, if we're talking about detoxing the body and we're focusing on a cleanse, I am certainly highlighting fruits and vegetables and really trying to do raw, unprocessed, uncooked, foods that don't require cooking is what I'm trying to say, and that you can eat in as natural a state as possible. So this is another example of a handout that I wouldn't say follow to the exact word, but gives just examples of certain foods that you may include in a diet or not, right? So we've talked about turmeric, I think, in the other lesson, I think week 2, when we talked about herbs. So I had included this here specifically as the liver detox, because it does cleanse the liver and the kidneys, but it also does some other things. And I came across this and I thought it was useful to mention, and especially in the day and age of needing to fight inflammation, which we know, and I don't think that's listed on here, but we know that turmeric is excellent for reducing inflammation in the body, but it is a great liver detox. In addition to cleansing and purifying the blood and helping with blood clotting, boosting the immune system, improving circulation, easing symptoms of cold and cough, cleansing the blood and such. So I wanted to mention that. If we're moving into the kidneys, we also know that if we're talking about what foods and herbs are good for the kidneys, this kidney cleanser recipe is provided here to do just that. Cucumbers are excellent, celery, parsley, lemon, all excellent for cleansing the kidneys. And if we're talking specifically about herbs, in addition to parsley, I would add juniper berry, uva ursi, and something just left my mind. I had at least 3 in my mind, but parsley, buchu, uva ursi. There's several kidney cleansing herbs that are excellent when we're talking about detoxing the kidneys. In terms of the colon, we know there's several foods and herbs that are excellent for that. Certainly they're not all listed here. Again, for illustration purposes, I chose this handout. But we know that flax seeds protect the intestinal flora. That's the bacteria or the good bacteria that's housed in the colon. We know that 50% of the bacteria in the body is housed in the colon, and our job is to keep the colon really clean so that the good bacteria does not turn into bad or disease-causing bacteria. Flaxseed can help regulate that. Alfalfa we know is good for the digestive tract. Spirulina and wheatgrass, these are green foods that we know are full of minerals and oxygen producing nutrients because of the chlorophyll. And we know that that's necessary for removing toxins from the colon. Chickweed is good for constipation and colon cleansing. Cascara sagrada is good for moving the bowels. It's a stimulant herb, so it helps to kind of tone the muscles of the colon. And usually it helps increase the peristalsis in the colon. And that is what moves the colon and allows it to push the waste through as bowel movements are occurring. And as we eat, if more food gets dumped in, or the waste product gets dumped in, and if we're not moving it out because we're eating the wrong foods and not enough water to push it out, it is also because of inactivity that peristalsis has slowed down and the colon is not moving and doing what it should. So we use these stimulant herbs like Cascara sagrada. Senna is also another one that's not listed here, but we know these are stimulants. So for some people, it can be a bit much or a bit rough. So you will take your time in terms of how much you consume and how often you use it. But we know that sometimes the colon just has to get knocked back into shape and get to moving as it should to move waste out of the body. We know that fennel seeds are great for abdominal pain, gas, enhancing digestion. We mentioned that, I think, in part 2 when we talked about herbs, and there was a handout about culinary herbs or herbs from the kitchen. This fennel was on that sheet, and so we know that it has tasty, properties in terms of seasoning our food, but also helps with digestion and relieving gas and such. Aloe vera, we know its healing properties topically, but we know that internally it aids in digestion and it acts as a mild laxative. So this is also healing and soothing to the entire gastrointestinal tract, just as it's healing and soothing to the skin topically. Peppermint is good for alleviating gas and gas pockets and gas bubbles in the colon. So it's also good for the colon and the intestinal lining. And then some of the foods that are listed here. We know mango can relieve constipation. We know also, though, that we would not overconsume mango, especially if we are having blood sugar issues, if we are trying to lose weight. This is one of the higher glycemic foods. It's a sweet fruit. We know it has higher calories, and we know that it has some starch content, but it can be helpful for the colon. We know that probiotic yogurts, these that have live active cultures, which is your lactobacillus and acidophilus and such, that helps with digestion, and that good bacteria that I mentioned when we were talking about flax seeds. We know that we have to take in foods that will help maintain that good bacteria in the colon. Yogurt is one choice for that. Same as with the fermented foods, they're highlighting the kefir here. Same concept where it is a probiotic source. And then, of course, all good organic fiber-rich fruits are going to be excellent choices for the colon. And I usually like to just focus on those lower glycemic fiber-rich fruits like your citrus, your apples, your pears, your plums, your peaches, even berries. Papaya, because papaya has papain, which is a natural digestive enzyme, we know that it's good for digestion. But generally your other fruits, which aren't listed here, but I know sometimes people, okay, pineapple is listed here. Pineapples and grapes I would be careful with because they are more starchy, they are sweeter fruits. So that's not a fruit choice that you would use on a very regular basis. Again, if you're trying to lose weight, if you're watching your blood sugar and that sort of thing. But yes, we do know that it's good for the colon. You just would include other fruits that are more high in fiber than some of these sweeter fruits, okay? I added here the handout here, and again, mainly for illustration purposes, but it does give details about the study. But the point is, and even the caption says, are you pooping wrong, right? The point here is that sitting on a toilet, and we know that not all cultures and all areas have toilets, and we know that defecation may happen in a natural squatting form, and sometimes just for lack of availability of the toilet, as you see here, but also because that is the proper way of using the bathroom to relieve your bowels. And just anatomically, the body is not positioned in the best way to eliminate if we are just simply sitting upright on the toilet, as pictured here on the left. Now, most of us are not going to stand on the toilet seat and do that, but what we also know is there are these benches that fit around the toilet, and their names for them, and I'm now forgetting. I have one right in. I have one right in my bathroom now, and there are different brands that call them different things, but they have these stools that you put and keep at the base of your toilet so that you just put your feet on top, and it of course forces your body in the correct position, more in a squatting position, even though your bottom may be on the toilet seat, but because it has raised your legs, your knees high enough to allow for that natural squatting position, you'll get a more productive bowel movement. And even if you have, stack some books up, or you have another little regular bench or stool, footstool or something to place at your toilet to prop your feet on, that's going to be a better way of relieving yourself. And it's similar, it reminds me also of, same with people who have, and slightly different, but work with me. When I was pregnant the first time, I had problems completely evacuating my bladder, urinating completely. And so they used to suggest, okay, lean forward a little bit and apply pressure right on the bladder, so that, and even if you know your bladder test point, and you can certainly look this up on like a reflex chart or acupressure chart, but the bladder test point would just right at the top of where our pubic hair would kind of begin. I would say that's the start of it, right? There's a point there. You can stimulate that point or press that point in, or if you simply lean forward, that also can help you to alleviate the liquid waste out of your bladder when you're trying to urinate. Because we know that sometimes people feel like, oh, I run to the bathroom all the time, and I never seem to get all the urine out. Sometimes it is a matter of us positioning ourselves properly so that we can urinate fully and completely, so that we can have a full and complete bowel movement, okay? So just added that in there. And this Bristol stool chart, this came from a book where they, a colon health book, of course. And this chart has been used to give example of just how or what our stool should look like. And this is very important. And some people will find this a little disgusting. However, this is waste. It comes from your body. And if you're not eliminating something of this sort every day, you are in fact in trouble. And I would really, really ask that you consider looking into that and becoming a little more at ease with having bowel movements on a very regular basis, and taking a look to see exactly how it is formed when it comes out of your body. That is a good indication of whether or not your colon or your whether or not your colon is healthy in regards to releasing its waste. So obviously we know that type 1, right, is a severe state of really severe constipation, where there's hard lumps, nugget pieces of waste that's coming out. If you never even look down in the toilet or look down, in the vessel you're eliminating in, if you feel very hard pieces coming out, you know that this is what the condition or what the state of your bowels, your stool is, and that's a problem. In the opposite vein, right, type 7, when we know that you're feeling complete liquid waste, which should be solid, that's coming out. It's watery, no formed pieces, no solid pieces. Again, you know that there is a severe problem. So even if you never take a look, you still should, but you know that it should not be completely watery in this form. So what we ideally want, right, is somewhere in between 4 and 5, even 3 to 5, I think is fine. But you want soft pieces, pass easily. You want it to be smooth, soft. You know, if you do evaluate it and you take a look, it may look like a sausage, as it says, may have some cracks, may have smooth, soft edges, but this is how you want your waste to be formed. And this is really important because this gives indication of how or whether your food is digested, right? And so we also know, so if we know that it's completely liquid and solid, it's not spent enough time in the body to completely and fully digest. We know that the body has likely not retained any of the nutrients that may have been in the food that you consumed. And we know that it's pretty much a wasted meal. And you're going to be void of nutrients that you should have been able to retain from that meal. We know that if it's this opposite and it's all of these really hard, dehydrated, really dry pieces of waste, then we know that it's spending too much time in the body. And we know that you're probably impacted and that there are pockets of waste and that you're really suffering with probably some bloating, some abdominal pain, some abdominal distension, where the body, the stomach is extended outward and you're full of poop, right? And so we have to evaluate what our waste looks like so that we'll know how to make those adjustments, not only in diet, but possibly in supplementation like probiotics or herbal laxatives and things of that nature, okay? So I wanted to, so we've talked about the liver, we've talked about the colon, we've talked about the kidneys. What I added to this packet so that we can adequately address the lungs. And again, I want to highlight, we talk a lot about breathing exercises, conscious breath work, things like that when we were in session 3 last week. But I wanted to add this handout that talks specifically about herbs that cleanse the lungs and the respiratory tract, okay? And this is important. And as always, I'm always advocating that we add to our regular tea drinking, you know, replace your regular black and white teas that you may consume first thing in the morning or after dinner, and include some of these herbs that can be really helpful to you. And so since a lot of times, unless you do have asthma or chronic bronchial infections and things of that nature, we oftentimes will overlook our lungs and our lung health and cleansing and detoxifying our lungs. So this handout is important. So I want you to take note of some of these herbs. Some are more common than others, and some are harder to find, but we know that herbs like peppermint, chaparral, lobelia, osha root, eucalyptus, lungwort, oregano, plantain leaves, and elecampane are all good herbs for your lung cleansing and detoxification. Probably really easy to find and very commonly used, at least here in the States, is lobelia, oregano, eucalyptus. Some of the others are maybe, and of course, peppermint we know is common and easy to find. Some of these are not as easy to find, but really, really all good herbs. You may consume them in a tea. You may make a extract or a tincture with these. You may find them in capsule form. And you may even use these in like a steam pot. I don't know if, and nowadays we have diffusers and we have these other steam machines and electronic versions of this, right? But while making a tea of any of these, especially something like your eucalyptus and your peppermint, and your oregano and lobelia and these types, if you're making a pot of tea, so maybe not the exact tea that you're about to drink, just in case there's some nasal drip, but Old school remedies were you take the hot pot with some people just use water. Some people, depending on what were you using it for, might have added salt to it. But in this case, if you've been brewing a tea or infusing herbs into the water, you take that pot of that herbal infusion and you put your head over it and drape a towel or cloth over top to close in the aroma and the steam, and you do sort of a steam vape or steam with these herbs to really open up your nasal passages and clear your lungs and kind of, you know, open you up a bit if you are congested and things of that nature. But so there are different ways to use these herbs, but these are some herbs that we can in fact use for our lungs. And of course, deep conscious breathing is always going to be an excellent way to cleanse and detox the lungs as well. Some additional handouts that I had put in, these I think also specifically deal with the colon, but I wanted to, let me decrease this a little bit. I wanted to throw this handout in because sometimes, just like when we talked about stress last week, if you remember, I mentioned in order to address stress, we have to know when we are stressed. We have to be very clear as to common symptoms of stress. Same regard here. We have to know when our systems may be toxic overloaded or toxin overload. Constipation, diarrhea is definitely a clear sign that you need to detox, that there's something going on, and that the colon specifically needs to be addressed. But we know that if the colon is overworked, it's either working too fast or too slow, then most likely it's also impacting the other paths of elimination also. Fluid retention is another example. We know that if you're retaining water around your ankles or different parts of your body, usually it is the extremities, then pretty much we know that we need to do a kidney flush at least, and that we need to address getting rid of the tension, the fluid retention, the fluid buildup. Skin problems, we've mentioned that already, but this is another example of toxin overload. So we know that if the skin is erupting and having rashes and breaking out, we know that that's a sign that something is going on, not only with the skin, but the entire body, because we know the skin is our largest organ, right? And we know that's our protective barrier. And so it's usually sort of that last stop. If you didn't catch it beforehand, oh, you didn't notice that something was going on with the colon, the liver, the kidneys, the lungs. The skin is like, look at me, you see this? I'm breaking out. There's something wrong. Pay attention. Right? It's not just vanity. It's not just, oh my gosh, my face is breaking out. Oh, this is so ugly. This mark or this boil or this cyst on my, it's not just because it looks bad that you have to pay attention. You have to know that that's your body saying there's some kind of infection here. There's some kind of toxins here. There's something that your body is trying to get rid of. So we have to really pay attention. And then these last two, not as easy to recognize as toxin overload, because sometimes there are other reasons that could cause this, right? But we know that if we are feeling fatigued, that could be a sign that the body is toxic, that is overworked, and the body is just tired. It's been trying to throw off the toxins through the liver, or it's been trying to throw it off through the colon. It's been trying to throw it off through the skin. And the body becomes fatigued. This is a sign of toxin overload as well. And same with irritability. You know, usually women get accused of being irritable, but we can all be irritable. I know some really irritable and irritating men, but we all have to look at that as, is that, you laughed at my joke. I see, I know, right? But see, and if you listen to the other hand, I think there's a homeopathic section that talked about irritability, and they had the nerve to only give an example of women. And I'm like, let's be serious. We can all be irritable. So I thought I'd throw that in there. But we have to look at why we may be experiencing that. Is it because we are, again, there's a lot going on in the body, and then that manifests into our mental state, our psychological state, and we become irritable. And we may not even realize. So we have to look at that as not just, oh, I don't know why I'm so crabby today. I don't know why I'm so highly irritated and everything is, you know, bothering me. This really could be a physiological symptom. And so we shouldn't just discount it. We shouldn't just say, oh, you know, you're in some kind of mood today. You're just feeling some kind of way. Look at that as possible toxin overload. Oh yes, and I'm glad I added this as well. So again, we've talked about the lungs, the liver, the kidney. I think I talked a little bit about in the lungs, but let's talk a little more about the skin. And this is a new handout because I was finding we had, and I think other than the skin brushing, previously I had not given really specifics about how to address the skin. Now, I still stick with what I usually focus on, and that is healing the skin has to happen from the inside out, right? It is important what you're putting topically on your skin, but it's also important that you're healing the liver and that you're cleansing the blood, right? These handouts, these herbs, these just give you a little more information in terms of how to do that, okay? So aloe vera, we've mentioned again, that we know it's great for the colon. We know it's good topically for the skin. So here is giving you an example of how it can deal with the topical issues. But what I'll also say is use it internally as well, because of that mild laxative effect that it has is going to help cleanse the body, which is going to help the skin. But we know that adding the juice or the nectar, the gel, will also help with blemishes and increase in fairness. Now, that's here, and I'm not going to overlook it because sometimes people think that this is all about lightening or making the skin fair, right? But we're talking about this, or I'm only advocating this in regards to if there's a evening of the skin that's required, not into that whole skin bleaching nonsense or skin lightening. But know that aloe vera is very healing to the skin and one of the top herbs for beautiful skin. The other one I'll highlight is neem. We know that neem supposedly originally came from India. However, it migrated onto the continent. So definitely we know that it grows in many parts of Africa. And neem is excellent for the skin. Definitely also excellent for some other conditions as well. But as far as skincare is known for clearing up pimples and skin eruptions. But because it's such a good antimicrobial and can kind of kill off different disease-causing microorganisms, it's still a good thing to include internally, because again, healing the skin is an inside job. Turmeric we've mentioned. This one here and all these handouts are talking more so from the topical perspective, but I want to, keep reminding you that these are things to do internally as well. But turmeric, this is giving an example of using it as a mask, as a beauty mask, because it can help soften the skin and help increase the glow and remove blemishes as well. Sandalwood is another herb . Okay, I muted myself because I thought I had to say something to the kids. And then I wasn't able to unmute myself. Okay, but sandalwood, we know this is an antitoxic, rejuvenating plant that we know is used in a lot of beauty products. Of course, most people probably use sandalwood for the aroma. It's a wonderful smell, so in perfumes and incense and things like that. But this is also good in your beauty products as well. And then rose, we know rose is full of vitamin C, so we know that it's healing and fights off infections. And since we know sometimes our skin eruptions are from some sort of infection in the body, we know that rose is something good to incorporate internally, but can also heal the skin from the outside. A lot of people use rose water as a tonic, and it gives good results in terms of naturally rejuvenating the skin. And then lastly, saffron. We also know that saffron is very expensive, right? And has a lot of benefits for the skin. It acts as a blood purifier. It adds glow to the skin, also works well with blemishes. And of course, if you can afford saffron to cook with and such, then great. It's something good to add. Might not be your first choice just because of the availability and the price of it. And here is cabbage again. Someone who had an issue with cabbage. Cabbage kind of keeps coming up. I think it just ends up having a lot of healing benefits. And here it is mentioned again. So cabbage and the marigold and the tea tree are the new ones. We already talked about neem and aloe, and I won't go over these, but I just wanted to highlight and offer this handout just to give other perspectives of how to heal the skin and how to treat the skin in terms of healing it, not only internally, but also externally. Now, I wanted to go back, and this juice handout, I really just added this here because we know that we usually do juice fasting or juicing if we are trying to cleanse and detox, but sometimes we may add it to a meal just to get extra nutrients. So I added it to this detox presentation just to give you an idea what different people may juice for these different conditions. So I won't so much go over this, but I want to point out they list each of these together, but these are not necessarily recipes. These are just foods that you may juice for these conditions. I'm generally of the mindset that you don't mix fruits and vegetables. So I'm certainly not saying, oh yeah, put, the pineapple and the celery and the carrot all together for the arthritis. You may simply focus on just the carrot and celery. And maybe you'll add some lemon for the taste, or if you needed to add cucumber to make it taste a little better, or something like that, even though carrot and celery probably won't be that bad. But what I just wanted to highlight with that is just that, because there's fruits and vegetables mentioned together, I'm not really saying all of these are what you add in your one juice. These are the types of foods that will cure, or I shouldn't even say that word, but these are the foods that have been traditionally used to address these conditions. And I think I wanted to go back. Okay, so this apple cider vinegar, I think this is also worth mentioning. So I found this handout that I wanted to include. A lot of people use this, incorporate this into their diet. For a number of reasons. Initially, I think people were using it for weight loss or blood pressure, but it does so many things. I do think it's worth mentioning. Me, I'm very particular about what I drink. Now I also love bread, so I'm not perfect, right? But I have done well with eliminating different drinks. But one thing I will drink, so generally I'm pretty much just drinking water. I do like smart water sometimes, not that zero one with that fake sugar mess in it, but this Bragg's apple cider juice drinks, this is another thing that I will incorporate in my diet. Now, it does taste like vinegar, and much to my children's chagrin, they are not happy and they will not drink it. So it will have that hint of that apple cider vinegar, but they have really good flavors. Grape, grape is my favorite one. I think they have lime, I think they have a ginger, but really it's like 10 calories, and it has no sugar. I think it uses, I want to say agave nectar, maybe. I have to remember. I have some right in the next room, but it's beneficial, it's healthy. It's low calorie, you're not getting a bunch of sugars and other additives, food colors and other things like that that you get from other drinks. So I would really suggest trying it, especially after hearing some of the wonderful benefits of apple cider vinegar. So among them are, as it relates to these paths of elimination, right? It dissolves kidney stones, right? It lowers blood pressure, lowers cholesterol, can help lower the glucose levels for diabetics. It's good for gout, which is a type of arthritis. It's good for allergies, get rid of warts, clears up fungal and bacterial rashes. It helps alleviate migraines. I already mentioned weight loss, so it can curb your appetite and break down fat. So that's why a lot of people use it for weight loss. Helps reduce inflammation, and therefore relieving arthritis. You can use it in your hair. It's a good hair detangler. So it relieves nausea. It helps regulate pH in the body. So it has a lot of healthful benefits. So if it's something you have considered or maybe heard something about or didn't really know for sure, you can add just a tablespoon. People vary. Some people will just do 1 tablespoon in some water a day. Some people may do up to 3 tablespoons in water. When I teach and before COVID, and we taught in-person traditional herbalism classes, this was one of the projects we used to make, and we would do apple cider vinegar as the base, but we would make a detox vinegar. So we would add other things like cayenne, sage, ginger. I forget what else we might have used. And sometimes I would just use what I had in my garden. So the sage I had plenty of. I think we maybe sometimes would add rosemary or peppermint or something like that. But you can add into it different herbs that you want to consume, and you can actually infuse it just as you would a tincture or an extract. And so you would put the fresh herbs down in your vinegar, let it infuse for a week or so, and then you consume the empowered, right, or the enhanced apple cider vinegar anyway. And we know that vinegar is one of the menstruums or solvents that we use to extract or infuse herbs with anyway. So even in addition to just using the apple cider vinegar by itself, you can then further enhance it or empower it with other herbs that may be useful for whatever situation you're trying to address. So I wanted to mention that. So I think we've hit on all of the paths of elimination. Also in the packet are just some additional handouts, some juice recipes, some smoothie recipes, things of that nature. And a lot of this is just for your information. Yeah, so usually goiter, thyroid, issues like that, your iodine-rich herbs are usually good for. There's a lot that can be said about that. So this I'm kind of just throwing out. You'll have to look more into it, but things like dulse, kelp, bladderwrack, some of those seed types of foods or supplements that are really high in your iodine and your other minerals like that are good for addressing goiters and overall thyroid health and things of that nature. Yeah, cucumbers are really good. Cucumber is a natural diuretic, so if there is water retention, or if you are trying to flush your kidneys, or you maybe you're not urinating as productively as you could, or you just know that you need to hydrate more, because cucumbers also is one of those foods that is predominantly water, so they're really hydrating. But all those types of foods are really good for you. Celery, cucumbers, parsley, watermelon or watermelon seed tea. My only concern about watermelon is that, it is a sweeter fruit that's a higher glycemic food, but we know that it is predominantly water. So if you do have a good diet, definitely watermelon can be included. And it's one of those things to just sort of eat by itself. And if you're going to do it, make sure you're not having any blood sugar issues. But all of these foods that are really water rich are really good and really healing for the kidneys, and just kind of getting the body hydrated and giving it the water and such that it needs anyway. And so they're good, really flushing, cleansing foods. Greetings, everyone. Zambia, Tanzania, Freetown. Okay, Sierra Leone. Greetings, greetings, greetings. All right, just trying to scroll through to make sure I'm not missing any questions. So the last thing I'd like to cover, I included these checklists. There's one for parasites, there's one for candida, and one for mercury, right? I wanted to include these handouts so that you can do your self-assessment, get an idea of what things you're taking in that may add these types of toxins into the body. So it's also, so clearly if these questions are on here, we know that these are things to look out for. So you know that common symptoms of parasite overgrowth, right, would be abdominal pain and constipation and diarrhea and excess gas and some of these things. So it's a good way of just kind of keeping track of what is going on in your body and taking note as to whether or not you maybe need to do a candida cleanse or a parasite cleanse, or if you need to do a heavy metal flush to get out excess mercury. So these are all just sort of self-evaluation questions that can give you indication as to whether or not you might need to go a step further and not just detoxing the paths of elimination that we've talked about, but doing specific detoxes for these types of conditions. Most people have a fascination, and when I as a colon therapist, when I would do the colon cleansing, everyone's fascinated with the concept of parasites. However, I used to always just say the standard American diet, but also the standard African diet, right, is very starchy. And so really what most of us have to contend with is candida, because we have a lot of starches and sugars and such that are in our bodies because of the foods that we eat. And so usually while people are fascinated with the concept of do I have parasites? Did you see parasites in, in the machine? Did I cleanse my parasites? Do I have parasites? Most parasites are microscopic, some are macroscopic and can be seen with the eye. But what we more so would see is candida, indications of candida, white, flaky, frothy, white foamy, types of substances. And these were people that had a high, sugar diet or high carb diet, or had been taking antibiotics or certain medications, or had, certain conditions, or like I said, just simply ate too many potatoes or chips or fries or rice or what have you. So utilize these as you see fit. Take note if you see there's a need. There are definitely many products on the market. If you don't choose to kind of put together your own herbal cleansing, there are many candida cleanses, there are many parasite cleanses, there are many heavy metal toxicity cleanses. And we know, I think cilantro was mentioned earlier in the handout on colon cleansing, but we know cilantro is good for heavy metal detoxing. And so amaranth is a grain that's often been used to pull out heavy metals from the body. So there are different ways that you can do to address these issues if you find that you have multiple symptoms that are listed here, okay? And then lastly, I just, that's not last, I probably am skipping a whole lot of stuff. Okay, so let me go to this. I included, because Black people have high incidence of high blood pressure, I included this chart. This is definitely something I say to check on a regular, get your own blood pressure cuff. If you even think that might be something that's an issue for you. We definitely know that strokes are very real. And one of the things, even as a holistic practitioner, that I included in our health section of our Global Green Book, and if you haven't gotten there yet, I hope that you will. But I included different things like signs of a stroke, signs of a heart attack, diabetes symptoms and things like that. Because in addition to knowing some of the natural remedies to treat a condition or to avoid a condition, we also need to recognize, and I think that's rung true in all my lessons. I always try to give you the information to identify a condition, how to identify toxin overload, right? How to identify stress. A lot of these little checklists that I include and questionnaires, even the stress questionnaire and stuff like that, so that we can identify. So keeping really good, close track of these types of things are important. And then you go to what can I do about it, and if it's severe, if it's in the severe range of whether you're borderline or whether you're mild, stage 1, 2, or 3, getting, professional help, because it's very important that we regulate. And even if you're a natural person like me, sometimes we need to kind of just get things under control and then start altering our diet, implementing things to avoid it so that we can get off medication. And find a doctor and say, these are my goals. You can, I can come to you and you can say what you want me to take and throw some pills at me, but you have to express, well, this is my goal, doc. Fine, I understand it's high. I need to work it down, but know that I want you to put me on a schedule to come back in 3 months or 6 months or whatever, and let me see if I can wean off of these medications and do some more diet control things. They're not gonna want to hear that you want to do some herbs, but you just tell them you're going to control it with diet. And we know that herbs are foods, so that's included. How about that? So this is for your information, to monitor your blood pressure and to know what things, foods, supplements, and such can help with that. And then the last thing is just the glycemic index chart. I've made mention of that today. This is a better version. If you've been on here before, the chart I had before, I found some of those numbers to be a little off. So I've redone it and included a better, more up-to-date, accurate chart. But these numbers will let you know what foods are low, moderate, and high starch foods. And this is something you should live by, because you want to avoid all foods that are over 70. These foods will elevate your blood sugar. The pancreas has to work overtime to create enough insulin to regulate your blood sugar. So all of these things are important. I just wanted to give that information to you so you can refer to it later. So I hope everything here was helpful. I think there was one last comment. If you need to email me, please do. nanaakua1@gmail.com. For the handouts, or if you have some simple questions. I don't do consultations anymore, but if you have a simple, quick question and I can point you in the right direction, I will. So thanks for joining us. And as always, I bid you good health and peace. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Present. I thank you for a great lecture, Nana Akua. Enjoy the rest of your weekend as well.
All right, peace.
Yes. On next, we're going to have a Pan-African organizing history class with Dr. Tyreen Wright.
Yes, hi, how are you all? You'll see me momentarily. And welcome everyone. We're gonna have an exciting session because we've had a lively discussion to some extent because of current events. So I want to, two things before we get started. I'm gonna be sharing my video today. So of course I need permission, but there was a film that we were required to watch, which was the journeyman, which was Cuba, an African Odyssey. And it's timely in the sense that, this will give an opportunity to discuss some things that are related to current events. And I saw a lot of the comments with regard to world affairs going on right now. So this is a great opportunity to address some of these things that are going on in the world. So you'll see me in a second. I've always got to adjust this little camera. That being said, so you had the film, and then there was an interactive lesson that we were supposed to engage in. I saw some contribution, but not exactly to my level of satisfaction, in the sense that I think that we could have done a little bit more to contribute to that in particular, but we'll talk about it. That being said, I'm going to, let me see, get my camera on. Hold on. Okay. You can't see me, right? Okay, here we go. All right, you should be able to see me. Okay, so so there was a couple of things that I'm going to share, which, you know, I'm going to share my screen, but we're going to look at a portion of the film Cuba and African Odyssey. That's what we're covering this week. And it's really to look at the highest expression of Pan-Africanism that the world really has ever seen with regard to African liberation. Some things, of course, this is a very fast course. So sometimes there are things that I would like to spend more time on and we don't get to, but I will try to cover with precision some issues related to African liberation and highlighting some people whose readings we have had. One, Emil Cabral, and then two, I will be starting with the most important assassination of the 20th century, which the film begins with. I'm just going to give a little blip of that, primarily because if you watch the film, then you know about Patrice Lumumba, and hopefully you know about Patrice Lumumba in general, right? Hopefully Patrice Lumumba is on your radar with regard to the conversation around African liberation. But if not, this should have educated you with regard to his story. And so I want to delve into that just a little bit, and I'm going to try to be really efficient and effective in doing this because I want to open up for conversation. I see a lot of people have conversation. There's a lot of discourse going on in the groups with regard to whether or not we should be concerned with Ukraine, but this context covered in the film, this moment in history, this period in history where Patrice Lumumba comes to attention in the world as the Prime Minister of the Congo Free State is important and relevant to that, actually. Okay, it gives you some position or understanding of the Eastern and the Western Bloc as it relates to African people and the Cold War. And it seems like a lot of people are interested in that because I don't see us unified around the fact that we have to stay focused on Africa and African people. And naturally, that's Black people, right? We are naturally Black. So let me get right into it. I'm going to share, let me say this to frame it. So Patrice Lumumba, 38 years old, becomes the prime minister of, who's a clerk, becomes the prime minister of the Congo Free State. What's important about the Congo, just so you know, is that the Congo and the 9 surrounding countries show a bulk of the world's, have or hold the bulk of the world's resources. So in essence, if you wanted to have an analysis of world politics, dynamics, and power, essentially, whoever controls the Congo and its resources and the 9 surrounding countries of the Congo, so the 9 countries surrounding the Congo, controls the world, period. What you will see, what happened in the Congo, and I'm just giving you the synopsis so that when I show you the clip, just a brief part of the film, you understand what you're watching. But what happened in the Congo was that it moved from Belgian colonialism to international colonialism. So at one point in time, the United States is actually the first nation to give a nod to this ridiculous scenario of a sole individual being the owner of the Congo, okay? And that person was King Leopold. And that happened in the late 1880s. That being said, the power or control of the Congo would go from that individual to Belgium itself. So from King Leopold to ultimately Belgium itself, with the consecutive Leopolds being in power, right? That meant that the Congo was exploited primarily because of rubber by Belgium. It makes Belgium very wealthy. If you know about King Leopold and the Congo, you know that he murdered about 10 million people in the Congo, producing rubber, okay? Forced labor, unbelievable levels of systemic violence and exploitation took place in the Congo. Many people objected to this. Even during the turn of the century, there was an outcry with regard to this. If you read chapter 4 of the book that I wrote, Booker T. Washington in Africa, The Making of a Pan-Africanist, you saw that I covered this commentary, because even someone like Booker T. Washington was propagandizing against the atrocities in the Congo because they were so well known. Okay, to this day, there is an organization out here called Friends of the Congo that advocates on behalf of the people of the Congo out here in the West, because it has been continuous exploitation of the people and its resources. The epitome of an extraction site, meaning extracting resources from the land and extracting labor from the people, okay, in order to put wealth into Europe. So the Congo has extremely strategic value in the world, okay? Probably unparalleled. And when you count the 9 surrounding countries that surrounds it, then you're talking about a bulk of the world's resource power and human resource. So to understand that the United States, when the people of Congo decide that they are going to push towards liberation and freedom from the colonial regime, the Belgians, the United States undercut or undermined that freedom struggle in the Congo, essentially. Infiltrating, right? Orchestrating the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, who wanted a free and liberated Congo, where the people, and what does it mean when we talk about being free and liberated in terms of Africa and African people? It means that African people, Black people, benefit most of all from what is to be had from the African continent and from ourselves, right? So we benefit the most, not the least, from our own resources and human resources. And that's what we currently have. We benefit the least everywhere we are. Other people benefit from our resources and our human resources. So Patrice Lumumba was just the opposite. He was hoping to lead the people towards a liberated and free Congo, take it out of Belgian rule. It is a transfer of power, and the Congo is given its independence. The Belgians try to claim credit for this. However, Patrice Lumumba gives his famous speech, the December 12th speech, where he talks about the struggle of the Congolese people to establish their freedom and liberation from the Belgians. But the United States undermines that, infiltrates, orchestrates an assassination of Patrice Lumumba in collusion with other Western powers like Belgium, and has Patrice Lumumba assassinated. The Congo would go from Belgian colonialism. So just picture Africa with one hand in it, pulling out the resources and people and all of that. And now picture Africa with many white hands in it, pulling out the resources. So it moved from Belgian colonialism to international colonialism. And at the top of the list of international colonialism would be the United States, who put Mobutu Sese Seko in power. And this would essentially destabilize the Congo in the sense that it destabilized the people and their move towards independence and liberation. Okay, the United States has strategic interest in terms of resources there, cobalt and coltan, both which are involved in sustaining the US military and their ability to produce weaponry and military armament. However, that was the United States, that was the United States only access to cobalt and coltan. Therefore, they were alarmed by the idea that Patrice Lumumba was dealing with the Eastern Bloc, meaning the Soviets, Russia, and was willing to work with the Russians. The United States was not going to allow that to happen. This was during the period of the Cold War between Russia and the United States. And the idea that they would not be able to sustain their military because these resources would now be out of their hands was the unthinkable to them. And certainly, yes, it would shift in the world, shift the power in the world, right? So they were not interested. They were not going for that. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to keep lecturing. I just have to get something. So what does this produce? This produces a scenario where the United States orchestrates the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. It is called the most important assassination of the 20th century. So I'll leave it there. What you're seeing in this film, Cuba, an African Odyssey, is a story from the outside looking in on the African struggle for liberation continentally, and essentially the highest expression of Pan-Africanism as African people move to liberate 17 African nations in just 2 years. If it were any other place in the world, people would still be talking about it and praising it. Okay? However, it was Africa. And yes, someone posted, not in this group, a theoretician talking about the thriving of the rest of the world is at the expense of Africa. This is true, and African people, be it physically because of our labor and or because of our geographical locations. Okay? So that being the case, the film chronicles all of the nations that Cuba was involved in, which I would say is an expression of Pan-Africanism, but also it highlights the fact that there was continuity on the African continent in terms of the idea of liberation, right? It was a continuous struggle. It went on for years. 17 in 2 years, 2 to 3 years, but then there would be many. Zimbabwe would, get its liberation in 1980, so on and so forth, or take its liberation in 1980. Okay. So we're not fixating on Cuba, although Cuba's participation is, I guess you could say, stellar in terms of a model of Pan-Africanism. They lend their military support, and that's complex, and they lend strategic advice to African liberation struggles on the continent repeatedly. And there is no other nation probably in the world in regard to Africa like Cuba. Okay. So, Dr. John Henry Clark, our great historian here, always says Africa has no friends. I would agree with that. However, historically, Africa has had Cuba, who has assisted it in its liberation struggle without quid pro quo, like no other. Okay. So let me just cue the film. Yes, you guys want to talk, we can talk. And that was just to give you some context. Let me ultimately say this to you. All Western nations have the same relationship to Africa and African people. Do you get what I'm saying? Russia and the Eastern Bloc do not have a history, did not build their nations off of racial slavery. However, let's be very clear, when Russia is involved with Cuba, once there's a removal of Russian missiles from Cuba, the world powers, the United States and Russia, speak to each other and cut Cuba out of the mix. So, you know, what's European problems are European problems, what are African problems are very different, okay? And we need to be consistent about it. Like I said, I believe what Dr. John Henrik Clarke said, the African person, the Black person, we have no friends in the world. We need to be our own best friends. That is enough of us for us to be our own best friends, right? The 1.4 to 6 billion people on the African continent and millions in the diaspora, there's enough for us to support each other, and then it doesn't matter how anybody feels about us. But let's be one more thing. Sure, the Marxist-Leninist line, which you will see even in this film, one of my favorites is Amilcar Cabral. But like Amilcar Cabral, and I'm going to try to show a blip of the portion of the film that covers him, right? And Guinea-Bissau and PAIGC, which is, you know, the Liberation Organization and Party for Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau that he led. But one thing that's notable and important to understand, because many of our African leadership have been Marxists and Leninists, and that's cool. That being said, when Marx and Lenin were saying what they were saying, they were talking about their Eastern European struggles with Western Europeans. They were not talking about African people. They did not have us in mind. Know that. So even though Nkrumah is a Marxist and Leninist, I understand that. I come from a political organization that had a Marxist and Leninist orientation. However, our struggle as African people is distinct and unique and unlike the struggles between competing factions of Europeans. When we take our liberation, culture is relevant. It's not just a material analysis. When we take our liberation, history is relevant. Yes, okay? And the European Marxist-Leninist position rejects culture and history as tools of liberation. And we cannot, right? Part of our colonization process was to strip us of our history, destroy our culture, and impose European culture and colonial imperialist culture on us. As we take our people, our minds, our land, our countries back, those things like history and culture must be a part of it. It can't be devoid of it. Right? So I'm going to leave with this. To understand the relationship between Eastern and Western Europeans, just understand this simple thing. Western Europeans enslaved Eastern Europeans at a certain point in time. The New York Historical Society did a wonderful exhibit on slavery. It happened here. And the first installment on the wall of this exhibit was the word slave. And for those of you who don't know, the word slave has nothing to do with African people, even though the condition has always existed in the history of humanity. The word slave comes directly from when Western Europeans enslaved Eastern Europeans, Slavic nations. And there was actually a nation called Slavs. So when Western Europeans wanted to get someone who was going to be enslaved for their labor, they would say, I'm going to get a Slav, plural slaves. I think that was one of the best things that the New York Historical Society has ever done, because it reframed the conversation. Sometimes people try to make it seem like when you say slave, you should get the picture of an African person in your mind. No, you should get a picture of a European person in your mind, because that word comes from their culture, comes from their history, and all of that, okay? They have great angst between them. However, it has nothing to do with us. We have to understand that we cannot be a tool in the conflict of Europeans, as we have been so very often. World War, II, and on and on and on. I come from an institution where we produced fighter pilots that fought in a war that was all about Europeans. It had nothing to do with African people. World War II, and the people I'm talking about are Tuskegee Airmen. The conflict had nothing to do with us African people, because as we come back to the United States, we are still lynched and murdered in untold proportions. We owe no loyalties to Europeans, their conflicts, their issues, or anything related to it. And so this is probably the best lesson you can get with regard to understanding when African people say we are going to come together in one of the richest parts of the world. Europeans are unbelievably interested. All of them are unified in interrupting that. And that is precisely what happened in the Congo. European powers, America, yes, is a European nation at the top of the list, was interested in interrupting that for their own best interests. Right? And the Congo still suffers today. A war rages in the Congo today, still. Why? Because Western powers will never take their hands out of the heart of Africa because of the resources. Europe is poor. Resource poor. Africa is rich. We want African people, wherever we are, to experience the freedom that we deserve as human beings. We want African people, wherever we are, to be the first ones to benefit from the resources that our God-given land produces for us, not the last. Period. That's what this is about here. Right? Okay. So I'm going to pause this for a second, and I'm going to open up. This is already posted in the group, the documentary, Cuba and African Odyssey. I'm just going to show a particular portion of it, and then we can get to discourse. I see some people were saying, we want to talk. Okay, so I'll let you speak. Okay, so one moment. I'll be sharing my screen momentarily. And for those of you who don't know, this is already posted in the group. Once again, you can go in and tap on it, and it actually is in YouTube as well. This is a magnificent documentary, and it essentially is, okay, hold on, I think I passed it. Okay, here we go. Just so you can see, I'm in 14B, our course. So I'm gonna share my screen and tap it and let it open it up to the film. Hold on, screen. Okay, so this is the course. As you guys saw, that was like our homework. You were supposed to contribute. Then here's the film posted, okay? So I'm gonna open it up in YouTube. Please let me know if you can still see the
leader of Angola's liberation movement, Cuba had for years.
Let me bring it to the beginning. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can see.
Okay, perfect.
July 1991 in Havana. It is Nelson Mandela's first trip outside Africa since his release from 27 years of prison. But why would the legend of struggle against oppression decide that the first person he wants to thank for helping to end apartheid is Fidel Castro, the very man who is regarded in the West as an oppressor of his own people? Fidel Castro and 500,000 Cubans took part in the African wars, which ultimately ended colonialism. This little-known story began in 1960, only a year after Cuban revolutionaries triumphed. Their struggle had captured people's imagination, and the young feisty leaders, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, emerged from 3 years of guerrilla war as heroes. The wave of independence in Africa was spreading like wildfire. That year alone, 17 African countries gained independence, and 30 others started their revolutionary armed struggle. African revolutionaries were looking to the Cubans as a model for their own independence. Cuba was living proof that David could beat Goliath.
La gran humanidad ha dicho basta y ha echado a andar, y su marcha de gigantes ya no se detendrá hasta conquistar la verdadera independencia. Quería referirme específicamente al doloroso caso del Congo, único en la historia del mundo moderno, que muestra cómo se puede burlar con la más absoluta impunidad, con el cinismo más insolente, el derecho de los pueblos.
Che Guevara was revolted, and his speech gave a clear signal that Cuba intended to act. The case of Patrice Lumumba in the Congo was symbolic of how African independence would be crushed by Cold War strategic interests. It was Lumumba's assassination that sparked a new era for many African revolutionaries, and with it started the epic of Cuba and Africa. The Congo, one of the largest and richest countries on the continent. The Belgian colony was demanding immediate independence. Patrice Lumumba, the young articulate clerk, led the movement that negotiated a peaceful solution to end Belgian rule. On June 30th, 1960, King Baudouin arrived in Leopoldville, the capital named after his great uncle, to hand over power.
Le roi Baudouin était dans une voiture découverte. Il saluait la foule, etc. Un Congolais s'est précipité sur la voiture. J'ai vu les gardes du roi dégainer. Et tout le monde avait peur, se disait il va tuer le roi. Non, il a simplement sorti l'épée du roi de sa gaine. Et il s'est mis à danser avec cette épée. C'est très symbolique ça. C'est comme s'il lui arrachait le pouvoir.
On Independence Day, all the dignitaries assembled in Parliament. King Baudouin was to announce the transfer of power to the new government. Patrice Lumumba had just been elected Prime Minister. But the euphoria of independence did not last long. That same day, Lumumba lit a fire that spread through the entire continent.
L'indépendance du Congo constitue l'aboutissement de l'œuvre conçue par le génie du roi Léopold II.
Le discours du roi Baudouin, qui nous rappelait comment la Belgique nous a sortis de l'esclavage, comment ils ont lutté pour nous sortir des maladies du sommeil et patati patata. Ça a été un choc. Nous ne nous attendions pas à ce rappel malheureux parce que nous estimions que le roi Baudouin n'avait plus de leçons à nous faire ce jour-là.
À ce moment-là, Lumumba se lève, qui n'était pas programmé comme devant parler à ce moment-là. Il se lève et il parle. Il fait un discours très militant.
Combattants de l'indépendance, aujourd'hui victorieux, je vous salue au nom du gouvernement congolais. Nous avons connu les ironies, les insultes, les coups que nous devions subir au matin, midi et soir, parce que nous étions des nègres.
Rappelez-vous comment on traitait le blanc par rapport au noir. Rappelez-vous dans les écoles quelle place nous occupions. Rappelez-vous tout l'apartheid. Alors évidemment, réaction immédiate de toute la délégation belge. D'abord, beaucoup d'agitation pendant que Lumumba parle.
Qui oubliera enfin les fusillades où périt tant de nos frères, ceux qui ne voulaient plus se soumettre au régime d'injustice, d'oppression et d'exploitation.
C'était mal reçu par les Belges, mais nous avons tout à fait répondu à nos aspirations.
Et au moment du dîner, on demande à Lumumba de présenter des excuses. Il ne s'en fait pas. Il présente les excuses en disant « Je pensais que je devais dire à cet homme des choses, je les ai dites, donc si ça a blessé, je m'en excuse et je demande qu'on tourne la page et que nous puissions voir les choses autrement. » Mais il était trop tard. La majesté était lésée. Et la majesté lésée a décidé le soir même de se venger et tout a commencé.
Lumumba wanted to govern independently, but there were only 30 university graduates in the Congo, so it was agreed that for the next 5 years, Belgium would continue to run the important departments of the new state, including the army. The soldiers felt excluded from the newly acquired freedom. Within days, they started a mutiny, which led to the breakdown of the entire country.
The troops were roaming the streets, all armed, and it was quite a racial problem. The mutineers were there, and they had matiti, that's bushes on their helmet, which was a sign that they were prepared for action, for combat. I can remember one yelling, "Venez, venez, sale flamand." We were all dirty Flemish. That was some expression that meant you were really bad, and we're going to kill you. More stories circulated about killing, rape, pillage, etc. It was, if you will, the Iraq of today.
Le 10 juillet, retenez bien la date, les militaires belges ont occupé l'aéroport de Njili, ici. Ils ont organisé l'agression du Congo en disant, puisque les militaires congolais mutinés se sont attaqués aux femmes, aux enfants et aux officiers, la Belgique n'avait plus aucun autre moyen de protéger ses ressortissants que de faire venir des troupes belges, le 10 juillet. 10 jours après.
Lumumba immediately turned to the US for support. The United States had never been a colonizing power, and their democratic principles seemed to guarantee support for people fighting for independence. Fidel Castro himself had chosen the US as his first stop for support when his revolution triumphed a year earlier. But like Castro, Lumumba's attitude did not go down well with the Americans.
I was in the lobby of the embassy when this little Congolese clerk came in and he said he wanted 24 visas. He didn't know what a visa was. I said, well, do you have passports to put the visas in? No, patron, he didn't. So I explained to him what a visa was, and I said, why do you need 24? Well, he said, Lumumba is going to the States to see President Eisenhower. I said, oh, that's interesting. Told the ambassador, he said, I'm not aware of it. So he checked, and Eisenhower said, well, if he comes, I'll be here.
Monsieur le secrétaire d'État, c'est avec un réel plaisir que je me trouve aujourd'hui aux États-Unis, pays de démocratie et de liberté, pour prendre contact avec vous.
Lumumba couldn't have made a worse impression on the secretary.
Let's be very clear, though. We're not adopting the opinions of this individual who was part of the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. We're just using this. Hold on. We're just using this for historical value to recount the historical facts, right? So treat this like we treated the Journey of Man, a Genetic Odyssey, right? We're getting the story, the facts. We omit the bias and opinions of certain individuals involved in it, okay?
State and his deputy and other people with whom he met there. He threatened, he asked for things, including to have a woman sent around to his room.
The visit was not a success, and it was clear that Washington would not come to his rescue. Just as Lumumba was leaving Washington, Cuba announced the nationalization of US companies, and a trade embargo was immediately imposed on the island. Lumumba, like Castro, soon discovered that the Soviet Union was more than happy to help where the US would not.
So if you want to understand the role of the Eastern Bloc in the Congo, this is it right here.
Lumumba commet probablement la deuxième erreur. Ils prennent la décision, ils font un télégramme adressé à Khrouchtchev pour lui demander l'envoi des troupes de l'Union soviétique pour venir chasser les Belges. Ce télégramme, avant même qu'il ne sorte, est volé au secrétaire de Lumumba par son ancien directeur de cabinet qui s'appelait Kandolo Damien. Larry Devlin s'accapare du télégramme, les transmet au gouvernement américain.
We became aware of it almost immediately, and it came from Congolese sources. That immediately alerted the Americans. I became wide-eyed at that. I said, we have a problem here. He tried to play off the West against the East. It's an old game, but it was relatively new at that time in Africa.
Mais Larry Devlin ne l'a pas pris comme ça, il l'a pris pour dire, voilà, la preuve est là, que le monde est communiste par conséquent. Outre le fait qu'il a insulté le roi des Belges, il est communiste, donc il faut le chasser du pouvoir.
The Congo crisis was becoming more than just a local conflict in faraway Africa. The superpowers were taking a particular interest, especially Moscow, that had recently set up a bureau for aiding anti-colonial liberation movements.
The Soviet Union was eager to help, or at least agreed to help, the legally elected Congolese government. It was in the last days of July, when a squadron of our Ilyushin 14 transport planes, about 10 left for Leopoldville. By the way, they landed in Athens, at the airport, which was partly NATO base. It became a big noise. The whole noise about the Cold War started when we landed there.
It was the first time that there'd ever been Soviets in that part of Africa, at least, certainly not the Congo, and very few in the rest of Africa, because the colonial powers were not desirous of having the Soviets there.
Третий мир в этой войне был полем, так сказать, для охоты. Перевели вам? Полем для охоты. Почему? В Европе границы были забетонированы. Перейти границу означало начать атомную войну, которую никто не хотел. А третий мир, он был как будто без хозяина. Там была возможна свободная охота. Там можно было приобретать влияние.
We believed, and I think it's true, that it was an attempt to hold Congo as a base, especially as a base of minerals for the United States, for the West. We should not forget that the first atomic bomb was done of those uranium found in Congo.
There are only two countries in the world that supplied cobalt at that time, Soviet Union and the Congo. And cobalt is extremely important for jet engines and all sorts of high technology. And we could not get it from the Soviet Union because it was a security commodity. So Congo was our only source.
I suspect that the people in Washington began wondering where are we going to get our cobalt from if the Soviets managed to control that.
The United States deplores the unilateral action of the Soviet Union in supplying aircraft and other equipment for military purposes to the Congo. The Soviet action, which seems to be motivated entirely by the Soviet Union's political designs in Africa. I must repeat that the United States takes a most serious view of this action by the Soviet Union.
Eisenhower fumed about aggressive Soviet support for his opponents. Soviet military aid for Lumumba arrived in the Congo only 1 month after the first Soviet arms shipment had landed in Cuba. To make matters worse, Castro openly declared that he intended to use these weapons to export his revolution. Eisenhower decided to send the CIA into action.
I received a message saying that people in Washington were highly concerned about the activities of the Prime Minister and that they hoped that he would go, it would be a change in the government. The next thing I knew, I received a cable saying that someone by the name of Joe would arrive in Leopoldville, and I was to take my instructions from him. And the instructions were that I was to remove him physically from, in other words, assassinate Lumumba. I asked first, whose instructions are these? And he said, they've come from President Eisenhower. The president wanted this done, and I was to put together these poisons and bring them out to you. One of the poisons was a tube of toothpaste that had poison in it, so that if he'd brushed his teeth with it, that was been the end of the man. All of these things I put in my safe because I didn't want them lying around the office. If somebody may say, may I use your toothpaste? I felt that I had some pretty good operations going, and in the long term, my operations would achieve the objective of removing Lumumba from office, but not killing him.
The Congo plunged into utter chaos. In the confusion, two separate secession movements broke away from Lumumba's government. The country desperately needed to be brought under control.
The United States started to worry about it because the Soviets were backing Lumumba. So President Eisenhower said, well, we may have to use NATO there to keep the Soviets out. But finally, cooler heads prevailed, and they asked the UN Security Council to send a peacekeeping operation to the Congo. President Eisenhower made some very basic policies which are still in existence today. And he said that if there are troubles in Africa, we don't want to have to send troops there, or Europeans should not send troops. It should all be done by the UN.
Lumumba thought that the arrival of the UN peacekeepers would help him bring stability. He was wrong. The UN mission provided the missing ingredient to oust his government. Lumumba had just promoted his personal secretary, Joseph Mobutu, to Army Chief of Staff. Mobutu was to coordinate with the UN troops to stop the country's descent into anarchy. Instead, he turned to Larry Devlin.
Mobutu said that the army was very unhappy with the prime minister because he was turning the army over to the Soviets. He wanted to mount a coup d'etat, but there was one condition. They had to know that they would have the support of the United States government. I had tried and failed to achieve by legal means what they wanted, the United States government wanted. So I stood up and shook his hand. Finally, it took me a while to do this, and said, I guarantee you the support of the United States government. And the coup, he said the coup will take place within a week, and it did.
UN troops were supposed to protect the independence of Congo, but they would not allow the Congolese troops, which were loyal to Lumumba, to operate. The mission of the United Nations troops was misused to topple the regime of the government of Lumumba, or at least not to protect Lumumba.
Les troupes des Nations Unies ici vont encercler la résidence du Premier ministre. Sans aucun mandat, sans aucune autorisation, il y a une crise interne, les Nations Unies s'interposent et vont mettre le Premier ministre en résidence surveillée.
Lumumba's supporters organized his escape. He was sneaked out of his house, bundled up in the back of a government car.
Le bruit s'est répandu sur Lumumba était parti de chez lui. On a commencé à le chercher. Mobutu a demandé aux Nations Unies de lui donner des hélicoptères. On l'a poursuivi. On l'a arrêté. On les a mis dans un hélicoptère. On l'a ramené ici, ligoté, comme un vulgaire bandit.
On Mobutu's orders, Patrice Lumumba was sent to his death. It was barely 6 months since Congo celebrated independence.
C'était terrible. Vous enlevez celui qui est le flambeau, l'icône, tout d'un coup, comme ça, et d'une façon très barbare, en utilisant les mains africaines. Alors c'était frustrant, c'était écœurant, c'était un appel à l'insurrection populaire. Il faut venger cela. Ce pays est à nous et je vais me battre pour lui. C'était l'étincelle qui m'a fait conduire sur le chemin du maquis, de la guérilla.
A witch hunt tracking down Lumumba's followers started in the capital. One by one, the Lumumbas fled to the safe haven across the river in Brazzaville. They organized themselves into an armed rebellion led by the 23-year-old Laurent Kabila.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop right there because that's long enough. That should give you some real understanding. I don't know who is. Okay, can everybody see me? Okay, so that should give you some analysis of, can you hear me, Yvonne? Am I connected?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. So that gives you some context and understanding of the Congo Free State, Patrice Lumumba, the strategic importance and the strategic value of the Congo and the 9 surrounding countries, and the relationship between African liberation and the Cold War between the East and the West. And if you notice, so you had a couple of Russian officials and people like that speaking about the period and the context. Sure, Russia supported Africa, but once again, we have to understand that you know, there is an important point that was made in there. which is that Russia is not heavily represented on the African continent because the West does not want, the West, meaning Western European nations, does not want Russia there. Okay. Russia did not assist in the liberation struggles on the African continent. Theoretically, yes, there's that orientation, the Marxist Leninist line. But in terms of playing a role in Africa like Cuba did, that's non-existent. Okay. So I'm going to leave it there. I wanted to show a piece of Amilcar Cabral, but because of time, I'm going to leave it right there. And so we can just have a little bit of discourse between us on the issue. Ultimately, what happens is that the takeaway should be this. African liberation, this actually film started with telling you what I had already noted, which is that 17 African nations would move towards independence in just 2 years. When people talk about the Arab Spring and all of this kind of stuff, are you serious? What about the African Spring towards liberation, to throw off the cloak of colonialism? Nothing like it in the history of the world, and in a short period of time like that, all regional, all over the continent, not just regionally. That being said, because it's Africa, it's not noted as that because everyone benefits from the domination and exploitation of Africa and African people, the Black people worldwide. So that's not going to be celebrated. That being said, this moment in time where you see African leadership, please watch the whole documentary if you haven't, is very important because Nkrumah will come out and say that the independence of African nations, and particularly Ghana, is inconsequential if it does not lead to the total independence and liberation of the African continent now. Hence the establishment of the OAU. And then, an organizing by African leadership to have such a body to bring about continental unity, right? And Nkrumah talks about a United States of Africa. I don't know that we need a United States of Africa, but we need a unified Africa, an Africa that's strong and unified in a way that supports and puts African people first, not last, right? And I think we had the conversation about colonialism. So that whole, this idea of Pan-Africanism sees its highest expression in that moment in time. When the continent, because it's one thing for diasporic Africans to talk about unity, but it's another thing when you talk about Pan-African nationalism, when we start to express ourselves in the context of national realities, okay, as countries, as nations, saying African nations are going to be unified and work in concert with other African nations. That's another level of expression. Okay. And of course, Pan-Africanism always means working to the benefit of African people, right? Not to the detriment of African people. So I'm going to leave it there. I could go on all day. I don't want to, but I wanted to just give you some context because I saw the conversation and it was right on time. This film that we watched, this is just when we would have watched it. It was not given to you because of the, recent events. I use it for every cycle of this course. So, it just happened to be right on time. And I want people to have some context. We owe no allegiance or anything to anybody but other African people. You want somebody to thank African people and Black people who have suffered, and actually every freedom you probably have was produced by your own ancestors, nobody else's. So, okay. So yes, of course. I agree with you, Jacqueline and Noel. Okay. Really, George? Well, George, I'm actually the person teaching the course. I don't know if you're talking about me or someone you saw in the video, but I believe you might be talking about me. I teach the course. So I don't know if that's problematic, then, you know, I don't know too many people teaching this like this, but I am. Okay, so it doesn't seem like there's a lot of commentary. Okay, so I will stop there unless people have questions. Anybody have any questions, comments, problems, or issues? Okay, so no, I think I'm gonna stop there. There's more to come. I think we're approaching our last session next week. Is that right? Next week is, I have to look at the syllabus again, but I'm pretty sure we have one more session. Is that correct?
No, it's not. This is the last session.
Oh, it's not? This is the last session? Okay, that's right. I'm sorry, because Tuesday is March 1st. All right. So yeah. So this is, we're wrapping up. I see the certificates are going out now. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. So it's good. We come out, we're leaving with a bang because this is an important topic. If you don't understand this particular issue that we covered today, then you very likely will not understand the world dynamics and history. Okay. So that just gives you some context. Roland, whatever their plans are with this whole thing between the Soviets and Ukraine, I say it's not our fight, right? I don't know, Russia, you know, Russia was trying to vie for power in Africa because its own European Western, adversaries didn't want it there. However, does Russia go into Africa the way Cuba does? No. If Russia went into Africa, what would have been its posture? We have to always just be very careful with that, okay? I don't think that African people have a role in the struggles between Eastern and Western blocs, because both of them are seeking to exploit to some degree, right? Even though Russia has not been a colonizer of Africa, regionally, it does what it does in its own area. And then that's part of the reason why the United States needs to stay out of it. But I will tell you this about the United States. If the United States weighs in on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, it is only because they have strategic interests, economic interests in the region. It is not because of the people or because they care about them. It is not because they are linked or tied to any humanist cause or any human rights effort in the region or with regard to the people. That is not what the United States does. The United States is aware of many human rights crises, many disruptions with regard to democracy. It is a disruptor of democracy itself right here in the United States. So when they go somewhere, that's because they have economic interest in the region. They have resource interest in the region. So the question is simply what we should be asking is, what does Ukraine have that the United States wants or wants to protect? It's as simple as that. And let me be clear for those of you who are within the United States, don't be so bought into this whole conflict, because let this go full scale war. And the reality is that people from Ukraine will come to the United States and you will be displaced because of them. That's how America does it. I was a child when the Cold War was going on, still going on in the United States in the 80s. 1 minute, they're talking about nuclear war. The next minute in my own community, there were Russian immigrants in the droves living there and on welfare. and Black people were still being killed and marginalized and economically attacked and deprived, okay? So don't be concerned, so concerned that you forget about your own struggle. The best thing we can do is fortify our own people, our own struggle, our freedom to move around the world. I'm a humanist, sure. However, I'm a humanist first to those who need it most, which are African people and Black people. It's just what it is. Yes, I mean, yeah, kudos, I mean, you know, yes, there's Castro is unparalleled in the world. I mean, if nothing else, if you don't have to like him, you don't have to love him or anything like that, but he was a man of action. Okay, and let's be very clear. For the critics of Fidel Castro, one of the things that Castro did, if you saw it in there briefly, they talked about at the same time that the Cold War was going on, Castro nationalized all of the banks and, you know, private corporations in Cuba and made them part of the government, right? So he nationalized everything, which was much to the chagrin of the United States. He did not have to get involved in the issues going on in Africa. But that being said, one of the things he did domestically was that when he nationalized everything, he took his own family's property and nationalized it as well and redistributed it to the farmers in Cuba. Very few people in any kind of form of government, socialist, communist, capitalists, they have one set of rules for the people and a different set of rules for themselves privately and their family. Castro is exceptional in the sense that he did not. He seized his family's plantation, okay, and redistributed the land. His parents would go to their graves angry at him. Not too many people can say that, but I think that if you really believe in a certain system, if it's good for the people, it should be good enough for you as well. There should be no contradiction. And let's be very clear about Russia. Russia is not communist in the African sense. It's not communal in the African sense. They still have their aristocracy, their class of untouchable people. So they're not authentic in the sense as Cuba may have been in terms of that example that I gave of Fidel Castro redistributing the land and nationalizing everything. Russia is not like that. Okay, Russia still has their aristocracy. It's communism for the rest of the people, but for its aristocracy, there is still an elite class there. That is not true communism. So always be careful. The world has never really seen a true healthy form of communism, probably outside of Africa, pre-colonial and imperialist presence in Africa. Okay, so we have never seen that except for pre-colonial imperialists, right? So we were communal on the continent of Africa in certain spaces and places. Right, exactly. Who is that? Chris, exactly. That has nothing to do with us. Right, true. We don't have any, we'll never see that again, I don't think, right? But we won't ever see something like a Castro, in my opinion, ever again. Or in our lifetime, right? And not to say that Cuba itself does not have some issues and contradictions within. However, the role that Africa has played, role that Cuba has played in Africa is unparalleled. When I assess various Caribbean and Latin American nations, I assess them based on that. What have you done for Africa? Because certainly you have so many African people in the Caribbean, Central and South America. And sometimes love to even boast about the African presence in those places. However, they've done nothing for Africa, right? and done even less for African people, right in their own, locales. And yes, I'm talking about in the Americas, the Caribbean, Central and South America. Okay. So yeah, there is no one else in the same class, no other nation in the same class as Cuba, right? Even during COVID. Okay. Exactly. Right. Exactly. Right. So I'm going to end there. Thank you all. This is our last session. Thank you for coming along for the journey. Hopefully this helped you in some way, shape, or form, prepare you, develop you to do the work that you're doing in I Love Black People and beyond. So be safe, and I am because we are.
I am because we are. Thank you so much, Dr. Taryn Wright, for a great lecture today. We appreciate all of you, and also would like to thank everyone who stayed with us until we ended this section. I will appreciate all of you. Hopefully we'll meet again next week on Saturday, same time. Thank you all. Invite your friends and family again to join us. We have a next class. At the moment, we have more than 5 people already full. So you can just invite your friends and family to join so that they can learn more about the Pan-African history. Thank you. I enjoyed the rest of the weekend. Love you all.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.